Good morning. The Thomas Hart Benton family is suing UMB Bank for mismanagement of the Bentons family trusts. Talk about this a little bit more on Behind the Gavel with Jason today. It's Friday afternoon, the last Friday before Christmas, which means we're basically out of the office for the rest of the year. And usually at this time of year, the art world's pretty quiet. Last week was Art Basel in Miami. Had some interesting excitement with that there with the comedian sculpture of the banana that we talked about last week. But generally speaking, this time of year is pretty, share now, share on the page. Generally, this time of year is pretty quiet in the art world. There are no major auctions in last week of the year, last 10 days of the year. There's nothing much going on except holiday parties. But this week a bombshell kind of hit at least the Kansas City area, and it's an art story that the nation is watching and will be, I am sure. The Wall Street Journal reported on Tuesday of this week that Jesse Benton, the last remaining child of Thomas and Rita Benton, has filed a lawsuit against UMB Bank here in Kansas City for mismanagement of the family's trusts. There are actually two trusts. Thomas Hart Benton died in 1979, and Rita, his wife, died 3 weeks later. Both had trusts that empowered UMB Bank to essentially be the executor and trustee manager of the estate in perpetuity, or going forward. I assume in perpetuity because it's been over 40 years now. And Jessie said in an interview that she didn't really pay much attention to it because she was obviously much younger than she's 80 years old now, and this is 40 years ago. So she was 40. She had young children. She wasn't really paying attention. It was taken care of. Mom and dad had written up the trusts and the wills and had it in place to take care of it. So she didn't pay much attention to it other than obviously cashing the annual distribution checks that she was receiving. She did start to notice that she wasn't receiving updated appraisal information or other detailed information about the estate and the collection. And so that was kind of starting to nag from what I've read so far. The lawsuit is 47 pages. I've read snippets of it. I haven't read the whole thing. I just found out about this yesterday. It's going to be a long developing story, I'm sure. Over the years, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, the family did, on climate-controlled storage facilities for the artwork, only to find out when she came into town in 2015 when the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art had a retrospective of Thomas Hart Benton's work in Hollywood. She found out at that point that her family's artwork was not in the climate-controlled storage. It was in a non-climate-controlled storage facility, which is, of course, very unsettling. There's a lot of, nothing good happens in storage, especially in non-climate-controlled storage to artwork, which led her to further investigate what was going on. She found that there's over 100 artworks that have not been, that are not accounted for currently. Some of these may have been sold, kept, used in the lawsuit. UMB is accused of using works of Bentons, hanging them in banks, using them in events, using them in advertising without the authorization of the estate. In fact, the direct quote is, UMB's use of artwork and property from the Benton trusts has been without notification to the beneficiaries and without compensation to the Benton trusts. And anytime you have copyright issues, if you use a piece of artwork in advertising or in any manner, and you don't have the authorization of the trust or the estate to do so, you can get in major serious trouble for that. That's copyright violation. You may also be subject to penalties because all of those pieces, all those images have value. And if you didn't pay for that image early on, you could be subject to penalties and fines and lawsuits for that. Thanks for watching, Nancy and Sean. If you guys have questions about anything we're talking today, we're mainly talking about the Thomas Hart Benton estate being sued or suing UMB Bank. Other claims, of course, the climate-controlled storage facility not being used for the Benton work after they paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for it is a huge concern for the family, and I'm sure will be subject to much debate in court. To be clear, UMB has failed to respond to this lawsuit specifically, since it is a active lawsuit, but they have made several comments. Jim Ryan is the president, basically saying that they take these responsibilities very seriously. And of course, they're trying to work closely with the family to rectify and resolve the situation as equitably and as amicably as is possible. and as efficiently as possible. The longer it takes over their head, the longer, the more concern it brings to the community at large. This is not the first time UMB Bank has been in the news in relation to art. Last year we did a Behind the Gavel video on them in regards to an ICE detention center. Please look back through our videos for that. But back to what we're talking about today. Thomas Hart Benton died in 1979. His wife died 3 weeks later, and UMB was set up as the executor and manager of the trust. Very unusual. I talked to a couple of trust accountants, trust executives today. We obviously work with several banks in the area. Their bank doesn't handle this situation. They don't manage estates like this. They manage accounts. They manage their executors, and they do manage, but it's financial investing and management is much different than managing the estate of an artist. It's a completely different mindset. When you're talking about investments, you're talking usually about set it and forget it. Invest in good stocks, bonds, markets, real estate, and they take care of themselves. With art, it's a living, breathing thing. Tastes change. In 1979, Benton's most expensive work was under $100,000. Now his record price is, I think, $4.89 million, rounded up to $5 million for most of the reports. So the value has gone up quite a bit, but could it have gone up more if the estate had been managed differently? I'm not going to say successfully or not. That's for somebody else to decide. But if you look at the estate of, say, Elvis or Michael Jackson, those estates, Picasso, those are worth much more now. Harding, Warhol, those estates are worth much more now than when they passed because of how they were managed. Was Benton's estate, if it had been managed by somebody who was specifically involved in that field and did that type of work, could it have been worth more for the family? Where they've had different opportunities, different presentations, different museum shows, would the selling been handled differently? This is another really important part of the lawsuit, and where I think, just on the overall glimpse, the first blush of it, is where UMB could get into a lot of trouble. Thanks for watching, Pamela. So Thomas Hart Benton painted, one of his paintings was called Desert Artist. And according to the paperwork, according to the lawsuit, that was supposed to be donated to a foundation associated with the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City. The Nelson has, I believe, over 45 paintings of Bentons in their permanent collection. They boast the largest collection of Benton in a museum in the world. And of course, it makes sense that they would receive gifts from the estate. Somehow or another, in 2000, Desert Artist was donated to the Kemper Museum of Art, Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art here in Kansas City. BB and Crosby Kemper and the Kemper family is very active in the art scene here in Kansas City, and we have many great things because of them, including the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art. But in 2000, they donated Desert Artist, this specific painting, to the permanent collection of the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art. And in the forms online related to that piece, it says that they bought the painting from a gallery and not from the trust. So there's something really odd about that. There's something very striking about that on the appearance. How did it end up at a gallery? It was supposed to be donated to the Nelson. And so how did that take place? How did that transaction happen without the family knowing about it? How did the Nelson not get involved with that? That's a really, really interesting, one of many interesting twists on this entire situation. Other concerns that the family has that Jesse has brought forth in the lawsuit, they were not, the appraisals were not kept up to date. In a situation like this, most experts agree that art should be, after the original appraisal is done, the value should be reevaluated every 3 years or 3 to 5 years, because values change. Like we just talked about, in 1979, his works, could be bought for less than $100,000, and now his works sell regularly in the 7-figure range. Huge difference in tax structure, in estate valuation, and what the family may want to do with the pieces. If you have a painting that's worth $100,000, you might decide to keep it. But if you have a painting that's worth $5 million, it might make sense to divest of a piece or two at that point that you hadn't considered doing previously. And since they have hundreds of pieces in their estate collection, they're talking about some significant assets. And so there's just so many many crazy things going to have happened around just the couple of days as it's been out there. Kind of reminds me of the Salvador Dali. I'm sorry, Salvador Mundi painting by that was sold for $450 million a couple of years ago. There's so much intrigue and suspense and mystery around that. I think the same is going to hold true with the Benton saga that's unraveling here in Kansas City. If you have questions about what we're talking about, please go ahead and post them. Darren, Pam, Sean, Nancy, anybody else is watching. But we're really fascinated about this. And if you study art history at all, there's been a lot of commentary. I've shared posts on our page about this today. What other nefarious actions were happening with these artworks? Art is used to launder money quite a bit. Is that something that has happened here? Backdoor deals. I mean, if a painting's supposed to go to a gallery, to a museum, and it ends up being sold through a gallery, something happened there that shouldn't have happened. Or there should be a paper trail explaining how that happened. So it's going to be really fascinating to watch. Obviously, we'll be having updates here on Behind the Gavel with Jason as they come available. Being in Kansas City, we should hear quite a bit, and we're talking to people all the time in and around the arts here in Kansas City. And so it'll be fascinating to keep our eyes and ears open on this conversation. Thank you all so much for watching. Like I said, it's the last Friday before Christmas here. Nice weather here in Kansas City. We had great snow last weekend, so we're not going to have a white Christmas that's going to melt, but we had a white December, which was nice. Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful holiday season wherever you're watching us from. Again, if you have any questions about this conversation or others that we've had, please post them in the comments below. Send us a direct message. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always post those comments below as well. If you have specific things you want to ask us about, you can always send us an email at info@kcauctioncompany.com, info@letter auction company spelled out.com, or give us a phone call at 816-283-3633. And just to wrap up, the family, Jessie Benton, the daughter of Thomas and Rita Hart Benton, has filed a lawsuit against UMB Bank, 47 pages, claiming all sorts of mismanagement and concerns with the handling and management of her parents' estates. And we're going to be following this closely over the next months and years, more than likely, as this continues to develop. This could take a long time to unwrap and unfurl and dig through all of the information that will be coming forth. 40 years is a lot to backtrack through. So, yeah, thanks all for watching. Have any questions, let us know, and we'll talk to you later.